You're listening to Forward Faster, bite-sized insights for entrepreneurs. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for the Forward Faster podcast. Joining us today is Osmund deSouza, Principal Architect at AT&T. And you are a networking expert. You've been involved in all kinds of things, working in mobility and software solutions at AT&T, including 5G. And that's what we're going to learn a little bit more about today. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Happy to be here.
So why don't we just jump in and, again, high level, what is 5G? How's it going to change the way we kind of share and use data? Tell us a little bit about that.
5G is a new standard for wireless communication. It picks up from where you recognize that 4G was the one before this. And 5G has been in development for several years, right? We've had about a 10-year run with 4G, right? It is a collection of standards and technologies that basically enable changes to the way wireless communication work. Right? It takes a dramatic step forward in, for instance, capacity, speed, timeliness, and most importantly, reliability. Right? Because when we talk about the performance of networks, it's okay to say it performs well, but you want to know how often it will. How reliable is it performing at that standard? And it's going to increase the capacity and capability of wireless communication so that it'll enable a whole new set of technologies.
Sure.
It will dramatically affect our experience with digital technologies for the better. It'll elevate and excite and stimulate new use cases, new modes of operation, new ways to leverage the communication infrastructure to make positive strides in the human experience.
That's great. No, it sounds very exciting. And anytime there's a new enabling platform or technology, there are new opportunities that come up that a lot of times people can't think about until they have this capability to build upon, right?
Indeed.
One of the things people are talking about are smart cities. And they use that term in a lot of different ways. But what does 5G mean to something called a smart city?
Okay. Let's talk about the word smart itself, right? We apply it today to kind of devices and applications. And what we really mean by a smart device is it's a device that interacts with us. That it just doesn't, respond to buttons. And it interacts with us in terms of being able to monitor things that we're doing and report it elsewhere. It interacts with us.
Okay.
It's a companion of sorts. Imagine that happening in a city. How does a city interact with us, right? This happens because, again, the city is maybe a collection of hundreds, thousands, millions of inanimate devices and little sensors and buildings and rooms, things that don't normally respond to us, right? And with 5G, with its massive device connectivity, meaning it now gives a voice to each of those
all these sensors out there.
All these sensors out there. And sensing different things. Cameras sensing not just action and what's happening, but you have cameras with sensitivities that can discern irregularities in shapes, in contours of things. You can have a camera, distinguish small imperfections in organ tissue. The way our eye couldn't. They're much more sensitive.
Interesting.
Right? Now, this isn't necessarily a smart city application, but we're going to see a proliferation, and just, again, it's going to be a dramatic proliferation of devices and sensors monitoring everything. How often a door is closed, how hard it is closed. It might seem like it's not important, but we'll find a way to use it.
Yeah, and so all this data.
And so all this data is there together. 5G is the first kind of networking technology that was developed in the cloud, in the cloud, for the cloud, by the cloud.
Interesting.
So in fact, everything that happens with 5G is stored in the cloud, is handled in the cloud, is kept in the cloud for informing action and results, right, based on the data that it stores. And we've got a bunch of associated technologies, blockchain and other security mechanisms that can be used to verify the authenticity of data, the origin, the fact that it's not been tampered with. So now you have not just a wealth of data, but you have a wealth of reliable data.
Verified data. And
Verified data, somebody stamped it and said, hey, this is what it says it is.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
Right? It suddenly brings to life a city with information and details that are useful. And if they're not useful now, we'll find a way to make them useful.
Right.
But what this does is it allows us to monitor city resources, government resources. Should we be spending the money right or not? Right? It allows us to be able to inform citizens about how they should meter their use of city services. Right? How long should I wait for this bus? Now it's uncertain. Right?
Yep.
It's supposed to come every 20 minutes. And even now, the technology exists for us to be able to look it up and find out that this bus is, 8 blocks
around
away.
the corner. Yeah.
But the fact is that we've just started scratching the surface of being able to know where we are with and our standing with city services, right? How they're used, how can I use them? And then, more importantly, we're going to find ways to combine all of these, right? We use something like, let's say, a mapping program to tell us how to get from A to B, but it tells us how to get to A to B mostly in one mechanism. If you've got a car, right? Now, what if it turns out that your automobiles aren't quite what we see them as now? Let's say you can combine shared rides. In which case, what sequence of shared rides do you take? Should you travel by auto through highways and bicycle in more congested parts of the city? Are they going to be available or not?
Right. Are they there?
Yes.
Yep.
And so our ability to keep track of city resources across the board, right, both for the providers of those resources and the consumers of those resources, is huge in being able to improve our experience in cities.
Yeah,
right?
that's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's just talking about cities. Obviously, 5G has applications in entertainment, autonomous vehicles, lots of other areas.
Indeed.
Is there any particular area that's most exciting to you?
Sports arenas.
Sports arenas. Okay.
Yes. So now you think about it, and it isn't. Sports arenas aren't just for people who can do the wave or who can cheer, or it brings you into the action in multiple ways. There's so much data generated by a single event, right? That's the key. There's so much data generated by a single event that you can process it quickly, right? One of the key mechanisms of 5G is edge compute. Edge compute is basically a compute mechanism that's close at hand. It's not in some distant cloud, right?
So it's
miles
happening
and
kind of
miles
right
away.
there.
It's compute that's happening right there and quickly accessible. Remember, I talked about timeliness.
Yes.
So timeliness is about just how long it takes. You send a query off.
Yeah, you don't want a lag of.
You don't want lag in time, right? And again, some of this you can't reduce. You can't reduce because it's physics. It's the speed of light, or it's the speed of a photon through a fiber, and that's not going to change. So if you've got to make a query, and the response determines an action to be taken in real time, right now, do I turn left or right? It's going to be available quickly. It's not going to have to circle the globe.
Yep.
Right? Edge compute. There are multiple forms of edge compute, two big ones, but the fact is that the compute infrastructure that gives us feedback and information on what all these sensors and devices are seeing is going to be more readily available.
Wow, very interesting. Change gears a little bit. You've had a lot of experience in all kinds of innovations. We have a lot of people in the Rochester area and the Finger Lakes region working on technology. Do you have any general advice for people that are working on new technologies or things that are disruptive technologies?
Yeah. We recognize disruptive technologies because we've got our eye on existing technologies, right? And generally, new technologies come out because we look at what is now or what has been for a little while and think of ways to improve them, right? And improve them not just in terms of, whiz-bang or technology, but in terms of the results they produce. And so that's the key here. Look at the use cases. Look at what it's going to be used for. How is it going to materially change positively? How is it going to elevate? How is it going to, enhance? And once you do that, right, you've got an end goal that is worthwhile. It's then possible stepwise to say, well, what needs to change in current mechanisms? How do we retool them? Right? Most inventions are improvements of current ways of doing things, and it doesn't just involve tweaks to
More evolutionary versus...
They're evolutionary, and sometimes they're just process. Treat it differently, do it differently. Yeah.
That's great. So what is it that kind of inspires you each day? What keeps you excited?
I think this may sound a little lame. Sometimes I think too, but I every now and then I'm inspired by basically our kids, the next generation. Really, if you look at, they've grown up in more of a digital age than I did and we did. Yet they work and they think as if there are no boundaries. Right? It's ingrained. It's subtle. You can see it, right? And so many of them, right? I take my kids as an example. I mean, they're just regular kids, right? And, they've gone to college and things like this, but they come out looking at the possibilities, right? Not in big, kind of revolutionary ways, but they're just tweaking and pushing and looking at new things. And they are our hope for kind of getting things done, right? In positive ways. I really do. I see that. And they're an inspiration, they're an inspiration more in a motivational sense, right? Again, I think our generation, certainly generations before us, are not necessarily leaving the world in better shape than we found it in some respects. And I think looking at what we're leaving as an inheritance for our kids motivates me to do better. And I draw inspiration from that.
That's great. Okay, let's fast forward 10 years from now. And when you think about networks and the evolution of networks and technology, what do you see 10 years from now? Or what do you hope to see 10 years from now?
Possibly 6G.
Okay, yeah. You said 4G is still 10 years old, so 10 more.
It's been a 10-year cycle. But I do believe that it's possible. It's possible that the pace is going to pick up, right? There's a fundamental shift in 5G as compared to 4G. Because remember, it isn't, like I said, it isn't just about additional capacity or higher speed. We've made fundamental changes in the mechanisms, the architecture. Edge compute is one of them, right? We've actually taken pretty big strides in antenna technology and how we use antennas and kind of maximize the gains we get from being able to use antennas, right? In different ways, antenna arrays and whatnot. It makes small cells so much more functional. We are able to connect, millions of devices within a short area, right? Because of antenna technology and how we can place these on the smallest of devices. And I think that is going to end up being somewhat multiplicative, right? We're going to find unrelated technologies that we can bring into the fold, and then we'll have to expand the standards to expand the use cases. And it might drive a 6G.
Yeah.
In 4 years,
Whatever
5 years.
that might be, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
5G will be one of the more possibly self-correcting and self-defining, self-tooling, right? It'll monitor itself. You'll have data to keep track of everything that's going on. You'll look at the data, and it'll be able to correct itself. You'll make improvements faster. It could drive faster and, just shorter cycles in improvements in the technology. Whether or not they call 6 or 7 or whatever else, but we're going to see an uptick, a different gradient to the improvement curve on this.
Very interesting. I think that's one of the things people will, in hindsight, in a few years, notice most about 5G. It's not just the next generation where, I can stream my movie a little faster on my phone, but all these things in the different architecture, I think are really what's going to enable some really new use cases.
Right.
So where can people go to learn more about what AT&T is doing in 5G?
It's simple. Simple is the new norm.
Okay.
It's the most informative norm. It's just simply att.com/5G.
Oh, love it.
And it's all right there. It's there for business, consumer, and everything in between.
Perfect. att.com/5G. Osmund, thank you so much for the time today and the fascinating topic. And we look forward to watching it all unfold.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.